Hey everybody, iPenguin Pat here, and today I'm going to show you the Challange Rift build I used to beat a Challange Rift at 376 combat rating below the monster difficulty. Now, this is not the best Challange Rift build because I don't have all of the essence necessary to make that, but I made do, so here's what we're using. Once I finish running through the gear and skills, I'll show you the playthrough and give you some commentary on what I did to beat the Challange Rift. For the helmet piece, I used the Mask of Illusions, and if you don't have the freezing helmet, this would be the next best helmet to use. Consistently, the illusion, copy, clone, whatever you want to call it, is extremely important for keeping you safe and for gathering up monsters to kill. I kind of use it like a black hole, which you'll see in the playthrough. The Starcaller's Drapery just helps to make it so that Meteor hits a bigger, fatter area, and that allows us to get more enemies stunned and basically to just do more damage. It's a lifesaver. In the shoulder slot, we have Searing Judgment. Obviously, this is going to be for high AoE damage and just a better disintegrate beam, and that's paired with the Chaos Nexus. Now, you could also go with the Calvin's necklace, or Kelvin's, or whatever it is, the one that makes the corpse explode when you blow up the monsters. And that one also has a lot of potential for this build. It's especially helpful for when you kill a bunch of like trash monsters around an elite or a rare monster. It just gives you a little burst of DPS. Personally, I like having the extra beams just to kind of hit the ones that are not in my main beam, but both are good options. Then we have the Wind Shaper, which makes our Arcane Torrent that tornado that follows monsters around. And the cool thing about this is that it triggers off of your Searing Judgment beam as well. You don't have to hit the monsters with your Meteor to get that burning effect for the extra bonus on this. So it's definitely a nice piece to have where you can hit them with a beam and then run away. And then the Unrepentant Gale gives us an extra charge for our Arcane Torrent, which gives us a little bit more DPS and a little bit more burst, especially because we're going to be running so much. A lot of times we can't use Arcane Torrent on the cooldown, and having the extra charge allows the cooldown to constantly be refreshing, even if we didn't use it right away. Based on the gear, you could probably guess the skills. We're going with the Arcane Wind because we have that tornado which tracks people. It's super handy, especially because we do have to be on the move a lot. We have Teleport with the Mirror Image, and again, this is huge for keeping you safe and for giving you a way to gather monsters to hit with Meteor instead of having them all spread out. Obviously, we're going to have Disintegrate. This is one of the wizard's best abilities in the game, and you definitely want to have this if you don't have the Ray of Frost. And finally, we have Meteor, and this is just a bigger, fatter Meteor, but it's really nice to get that stun. For my legendary gems, I was running Seeping Bile, which is obviously great for killing packs of monsters and just an overall awesome legendary gem. Obviously, Blood-Soaked Jade is terrific. The movement speed is extremely helpful. Fervent Fang and Bloody Reach are the twin damage adders for our 2 stars. And I wouldn't rank these up past rank 5. It just starts to get cost prohibitive. But at rank 5, these are both really good options. We also have Trick Shot Gem, and this actually comes in really important for taking down monsters that have higher combat rating because you have to do so much more damage. With the low combat rating, you can just, tag them once and they die. But this helps when you have to beam a monster continuously in order to get them killed. And finally, I had Zwinson's Haunting, not because it's the best option, but because that's a 4-star and I got it really cheap. I think I paid like 60,000 platinum for the 4-star, and that's literally the only reason why I have this one and not something else. It's not because it's the best option. It's a good one, but it's definitely not the best. I do think that Chip of Stone Flesh would be a better option. This extra damage burst that you get when you have a stun is absolutely terrific. And if you have the freezing beam, it's even better. For Challange Rifts in particular, Chip of Stone Flesh is one of the best legendary gems that you can get. And at rank 3, that extra 6% damage plus this big boost of burst damage from the curse, this is absolutely, for Challange Rifts, one of the best options that you can get. And then also the Echoing Shade is a really good option for Challange Rifts. The decoys will help to keep monsters from hitting you, especially those pesky ranged monsters that have a way of just chipping at you and really messing you up. and this kind of helps to tank those monsters. From a DPS standpoint, I'm not so worried about it. I would have used this, but again, I'm not a big spender. I think I have like 50 bucks in the game as of recording this, so I don't have the gem power to level this up, so it just sits in inventory until something better comes along. One thing that gets left out in a lot of videos is normal gems, and I highly recommend not ignoring them. They are really important for your success. I'm getting tons of extra damage from normal gems. Here you can see for my red gems, I'm using the damage, the tourmaline, for as many as I could. And then for the yellow gems, I'm mostly focused on the potency, but I do have some resistance in there. The potency is really helpful for keeping the monsters stunned when you hit them with the meteor, and it's also really helpful for increasing the duration of the seeping bile. So you definitely want to have more of that extra potency, obviously more damage. And the other really big one that people sleep on is the armor penetration. This is actually huge. In my case, I have a really high armor pen. It's something I focused on, so I get a lot extra damage for my crits. And since we're already dealing with some really hard to beat monsters and there's so much damage reduction, having that extra crit is crucial for being able to burn these monsters down. For your Paragon tree, you're going to want to focus on as much damage and armor penetration as you possibly can. For the solo challenge rift, I use Vanquisher because getting this extra zeal and wrath is really helpful for pumping out that damage that you need. If you are running a raid or a dungeon or a 4-man challenge rift, then you want to use Mastermind because getting the covert operations and the find weakness is absolutely huge for burning down those monsters at the end. With respect to sets, generally speaking, you're going to be focused on having the highest combat rating possible if you're doing challenge rift pushes, and your set bonuses really can't make up for the extra combat rating that you get and the extra benefit that you get from being closer to the monster level. The Feasting Barons pack is probably the only exception. The 2-piece bonus that adds 30% duration to loss of control abilities is a really big deal and can be an absolute lifesaver. Being able to have your meteor stun last longer or your freezes last longer can be the difference between staying alive and dying. So it's not only a survivability benefit, but there's also some damage benefit as well. And when you combine things like this with stuff like your Chip of Stone Flesh, it's a really powerful set, and it is definitely worth giving up a decent amount of combat rating to have that extra stun ability. Last thing to look at before getting into the gameplay, if you actually want the best build, I do believe that having this Shiverscent Stare headpiece is the best option, especially if you're playing in a team mode, but even in a solo mode, this is amazing, especially when paired with the Chip of Stone Flesh. And then for your offhand, having the Hailstone, which gives your ice armor 6 charges of damage immunity, is huge in these challenge rifts. A lot of times you're not getting hit very many times as a wizard. It's mostly just that you get hit from a few stray projectiles, and this helps to keep you topped up and keeps you from dying way more than pretty much anything else that you can use. Those 2 items alone could add 100 or 200 to the combat rating that you could complete. Okay, time to look at some gameplay. As you would expect with this build, the idea is to use Disintegrate to put a burning effect on the monsters, and then use Arcane Wind to add extra damage. This allows you to keep damaging monsters at a pretty high rate of DPS without having to sacrifice mobility because you're standing there channeling. Another huge success factor for any wizard doing a challenge rift is effective use of teleport. In this case, because the teleport leaves behind a clone, you can use it to gather up enemies and drop meteors on them and stun them in place. The other thing that it can also be useful for is just to kind of tank monsters and give you some space if you are in need of a breather so you can get your health potion to tick and heal back up. Teleport does remove certain movement impairing effects, and it's also good for getting out of those wall traps or whatever it is that has you boxed in. You can also use it to change between levels and to go around walls or through walls, which a lot of times can save you if you are getting low on health, or it can just put you in a better position to be aggressive with your big attacks and cooldowns. It doesn't even necessarily have to be Meteor. There you could see that I used the clone to gather up the enemies and then used Disintegrate to burn them down, and that basically gives me a black hole type effect without having to use a black hole ability. And it's extremely helpful for these high monster difficulty challenge rift pushes. A lot of times in challenge rifts, players will skip these yellow rare monsters because the risk reward is just not optimal. But with this build, we can get away with killing these rare monsters without risking dying too much, and we can get that DPS in fast enough that it's worth our time to take them out. I knew I was close to bringing up the boss, so I was trying to save that speed orb, but I stepped on it on accident. Don't underestimate the power of those speed orbs. They're almost as good as a frenzy shrine for extra damage. I mentioned Arcane Torrent earlier in the video, and that's with a good reason. You have a couple of seconds between the last kill and getting the boss to come up, and I used that time to switch to Arcane Torrent. I've done pretty extensive testing, and the extra speed and damage that you get from using Arcane Torrent makes using a double channel option better than trying to keep Meteor or something like that. Because Arcane Torrent does so much damage, it offsets any damage lost by having two channel skills and not having a persistent damage ability like Scorch or Meteor. Additionally, Scorch and Meteor have a long cooldown and they have a limited ability to change where you aim. So if you have a monster that is chasing you like this one, if you drop a Meteor, they'll just walk out of the AoE and then you stop having damage. And if you want to talk about the magic missile spam, unless you're using the 4-piece Vithu set, you're not really going to be doing as much damage as you would with the Arcane Torrent. I just find that the mobility and the extra burst damage from Arcane Torrent just works better. Another thing to keep in mind is whether or not you'll be hitting the ads or not. For example, if I know I'm going to be shooting directly through ads, I'll use my beam so that I hopefully kill some of them as well. Whereas if I'm only hitting the main boss, I go with the Arcane Torrent because that's higher damage per second. Whereas if I'm aware that I'm about to use Arcane Wind, I'll make sure to get a beam off so that there's a burning effect, and that way Arcane Wind does maximum damage. Another thing to be mindful of is elevation and just the space that you're fighting in. Don't be afraid to kite the boss and the monsters around, either circling or just dragging them throughout the entire level. You can also use elevation to your advantage. There are certain AoE effects that bosses use that will miss you if you are on a different elevation, and that makes bosses that are typically extremely difficult considerably easier to manage. You'll just have to play around with each boss and try to figure out which ones are affected by elevation and which ones will hit you regardless. If you are using Arcane Torrent on a mobile enemy, be sure to keep in mind that there is a bit of a travel time between when the Arcane Torrent goes off and when it hits the target. So you have to lead the target a little bit or you'll miss. So there you have it. This is the second best challenge rift build available for Wizard, and it's the one that I used to beat monsters that were almost 400 combat rating higher than me. Hopefully this video helped you to get an idea of how to do better with challenge rifts. And if you found this video to be helpful, please like and subscribe and share with your friends, and I will catch you in the next video.